The cruelest invitations are the ones wrapped in gold. Naomi Carter stared at the cream-colored envelope resting beside her coffee cup while rain tapped softly against the apartment window behind her. The handwriting on the front was elegant, expensive, deliberate. Victoria Ale. Even after 2 years, Naomi recognized the sharp curve of her letters instantly. She opened it slowly, her expression unreadable as the city lights of Brooklyn flickered across her kitchen counter. Inside was a black invitation card embossed with silver foil. Ethan Whitmore and Victoria Hale request the pleasure of your presence at the Whitmore Foundation Gala. At the bottom, written in thin cursive ink, was a message that made Naomi's fingers pause for half a second. Come see what you lost. Somewhere across Manhattan, laughter exploded through Victoria's live stream as she held up her phone inside a penthouse glowing with chandeliers and champagne towers. Do you guys think she'll actually show up? Victoria asked her followers while her friends laughed around her. Maybe we should let her help with coats at the door. Ethan stood near the marble fireplace adjusting the cuff of his Rolex, pretending not to hear it, but the faint smirk on his face said enough. Naomi watched the live stream on her cracked phone screen in silence. No anger. No tears. Used quiet stillness. The kind that made pain look old. She reached for her mug, now cold, and stared at her reflection in the dark coffee for a moment. 2 years ago, she used to stand beside Ethan at events like these. Back when his suits were rented. Back when she stayed awake at 2 de la mañana editing his business proposals while balancing 2 jobs just to keep the lights on in their tiny apartment in Queens. She remembered the nights he promised her they were building a future together. She also remembered how quickly he erased her from that future once the money arrived. Naomi placed the invitation back into the envelope with careful hands. Outside, sirens echoed faintly through wet streets while the radiator hissed beside her kitchen wall. The apartment smelled like coffee beans and rainwater. Smell. Quiet. Invisible. Exactly how they imagined her life had become. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification from Victoria's live stream. Thousands of comments laughing. Macking. Waiting for the poor ex-wife to appear so Manhattan's elite could enjoy one more joke over champagne. Naomi looked toward the bedroom where a single black garment bag hung near the closet door. Her eyes rested there for a long moment before she finally whispered softly to herself, "They really sold Bill, let me disappear." By midnight, Victoria's live stream already had almost 300,000 views. Clips of her laughing about Naomi were spreading across social media accounts across New York, usually paired with comments about failed marriages, bitter ex-wives, and women who could not keep up with successful men. Naomi saw every post while sitting alone at the small wooden table near her apartment window, but her face never changed. The city outside glowed silver through the rain while old jazz played softly from a radio on the kitchen counter. She folded the invitation carefully and slipped it back into the envelope as if it were something fragile instead of cruel. Then she stood and walked toward the bedroom closet. Inside, hanging behind a row of plain work jackets, was an old cream-colored hoodie with faded paint stains along the sleeves. A Dan's old startup hoodie. Naomi touched the fabric lightly, and for the first time that night, her expression shifted. Not anger. Memory. Back then, Ethan Whitmore did not belong to Manhattan elites. It belonged to late-night diners, unpaid bills, and dreams too big for their tiny apartment in Queens. Naomi could still remember sitting cross-legged on the floor beside him while he practiced investor pitches to their cracked bathroom mirror because it was the only full-length mirror they owned. She designed his first company logo on a borrowed laptop that overheated every 20 minutes. She skipped classes at the Fashion Institute so she could help him prepare presentations before meetings. Every time Ethan panicked, Naomi was there with coffee, edits, encouragement, and hands warm from holding his face while promising him they would survive together. One day, Ethan used to whisper while tracing circles across her fingers, "I am going to give you everything." For a while, Naomi believed him. Then the money arrived. The dinners became private clubs. The cheap suits became Italian tailoring. The men who once kissed her forehead before every meeting slowly started introducing her less and less. Naomi still remembered the exact moment she realized she no longer fit inside Ethan's new world. It happened at a rooftop fundraiser in Tribeca 3 years earlier. A woman in diamonds asked Ethan if Naomi was part of the catering staff because she was carrying his coat. Ethan laughed. Used once. Quietly. But he never corrected her. That was the night something inside Naomi stopped reaching for him. Months later, the divorce papers arrived through email while Ethan vacationed in St. Barthélemy with Victoria Hale. Naomi removed the old hoodie from the closet and folded it slowly before placing it into a donation box near the door. Then she looked toward the black garment bag hanging beside the mirror again. This time, she unzipped it halfway. Silver fabric shimmered softly beneath the apartment light like liquid moonlight. Naomi stared at it in silence while thunder rolled somewhere above Manhattan. The gala arrived wrapped in cold November air and camera flashes bright enough to turn midnight into daylight. Limousines lined the entrance of the Whitmore Foundation ballroom while Manhattan's elite stepped across a white marble staircase beneath crystal chandeliers hanging 3 stories high. Women in designer gowns floated through the lobby with champagne glasses balanced between polished fingers while men adjusted velvet tuxedo jackets beside walls covered in white roses imported from Italy that morning. Every inch of the night smelled expensive. Victoria Hale stood at the center of it all wearing a fitted gold dress that caught the light every time she moved. Her smile never left her face as photographers circled around her. Victoria, over here. Victoria, look this way. She loved every second of it. Ethan stood beside her, calm and polished, one hand resting lightly in his pocket while investors and politicians shook his hand. To everyone inside the ballroom, they looked perfect. Untouchable. Victorious. But every few minutes, Victoria glanced toward the entrance. Waiting. Hunting. Do you really think she will come? One of her friends asked softly while sipping champagne beside the ice sculpture near the dance floor. Victoria smirked without looking away from the doors. Oh, she will come, she said. People like Naomi always come when they are invited to watch what they lost. Across the ballroom, laughter rose gently beneath the soft sound of a string quartet. Ethan pretended to ignore the conversation, but his jaw tightened slightly as another guest approached him with a grin. Your ex-wife still living in Brooklyn? The man asked casually. Ethan gave a quiet laugh and lifted his glass. I honestly would not know. The lie slid from his mouth too easily. Because sometimes, late at night, Ethan still searched Naomi's name online when Victoria was asleep beside him. Not because he missed her. At least that was what he told himself. He simply wanted proof that leaving her had been the right decision. That she had remained exactly where he left her. Small. Forgotten. Harmless. Then the ballroom doors opened. At first, nobody reacted. A woman stepped inside wearing a long black wool coat while rainwater shimmered faintly across the marble floor behind her. But slowly, conversations began to fade one by one. The string quartet faltered. Even camera flashes slowed. Naomi Carter removed her gloves carefully before lifting her eyes toward the ballroom. Calm. Silent. Untouched by the room staring back at her. Victoria's smile froze for half a second. Ethan turned fully toward the entrance, and something unfamiliar moved across his face. Because the woman standing beneath the chandelier no longer looked like the Naomi they remembered. She looked like someone the room should have stood up for. Naomi reached slowly for the buttons of her coat while the ballroom watched in complete silence. The coat slipped from Naomi's shoulders slowly, revealing a silver gown that seemed to capture every light inside the ballroom at once. The fabric moved like liquid glass against her skin, elegant without trying too hard, powerful without demanding attention. Conversations stopped completely now. Even the waiters carrying champagne trays slowed as eyes followed her across the marble floor. Victoria's face remained frozen in place while her friends exchanged uncertain glances beside her. This was not the woman they expected to embarrass tonight. Naomi walked calmly past the entrance without rushing, her heels tapping softly against the polished floor beneath the chandeliers. She did not look nervous. She did not look impressed. She looked like she belonged there more than anyone else in the room. Ethan stared at her as though his mind could not fully catch up to what his eyes were seeing. Naomi had always been beautiful. He knew that. But this was different. The woman standing in front of him now carried herself with a kind of stillness that money alone could never buy. It unsettled him more than anger would have. Victoria recovered first. She lifted her champagne glass and forced a bright smile onto her face before walking toward Naomi with cameras instantly following behind her. "Naomi," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "I almost did not recognize you." Naomi turned toward her slowly. "That usually happens when people stop paying attention," she replied softly. A few guests nearby exchanged looks while Victoria's smile tightened for just a second. Ethan stepped forward next, adjusting the cuff of his tuxedo as though he suddenly needed something to do with his hands. "You came," he said quietly. Naomi looked at him for a moment. "Not bitter. Not emotional. Just observant." "You invited me," she answered. Ethan opened his mouth slightly as though he wanted to say something else, but nothing came out. Because standing this close to Naomi again brought back memories he had spent 2 years trying to bury beneath luxury apartments, expensive watches, and curated appearances. He remembered her sitting barefoot on the floor beside stacks of paperwork. He remembered her sketching logos across notebooks while eating instant noodles at midnight. He remembered the way she used to smile at him before success taught him to chase different things. Across the ballroom, whispers had already started moving through the crowd. "Who designed that dress? Is that custom couture? I thought she was broke." Victoria heard every word, and each whisper chipped away at the perfect image she had planned for tonight. She leaned closer toward Naomi with a light laugh that sounded sharper than before. "Well," she said while glancing at the gown, "someone clearly spent a fortune trying to impress people." Naomi lowered her eyes briefly toward the silver fabric before looking back at Victoria. "No," she said calmly. "The right people are never impressed by money." For the first time that evening, Victoria had no response ready. Then suddenly, the ballroom entrance opened again. Several hotel staff members straightened instantly. A black luxury car had just arrived outside beneath the rain, and the mood inside the room shifted in a way Naomi seemed to notice before anyone else. The atmosphere inside the ballroom changed before anyone even saw who had arrived. Staff members near the entrance straightened instantly. Security earpieces crackled softly. One of the hotel managers hurried across the marble floor with the kind of nervous focus usually reserved for presidents or royalty. Guests began whispering quietly while photographers shifted toward the doors again, sensing something important. Victoria glanced toward the entrance with irritation already building beneath her smile. This was supposed to be her night. Her event. Her spotlight. But somehow, ever since Naomi walked into the room, the attention kept slipping away from her like sand through perfectly manicured fingers. Naomi remained calm beside the champagne tower, her silver gown shimmering softly beneath the chandeliers while the crowd continued staring at her in confusion and curiosity. Ethan watched her carefully from across the ballroom. He could not explain it, but standing near Naomi again made the entire room suddenly feel artificial. Love. Over-designate. Temporary. Naomi looked like none of it mattered to her anymore. Then the doors opened fully. Rainy Manhattan light spilled across the marble entrance as a tall man stepped inside wearing a black tailored overcoat. Dark enough to blend into the shadows around him. He moved without hurry, but the energy of the room shifted instantly around his presence. Older investors recognized him first. A senator near the bar nearly lowered his drink too quickly. Someone whispered a name under their breath. Alexander Laurent. Ethan's face tightened immediately. Of course he knew the name. Everyone in finance knew the name. Alexander Laurent was the billionaire behind Laurent Group, the luxury fashion empire expanding across Europe and the United States faster than anyone predicted. His company had recently started buying major shares in several New York firms, including companies connected to Ethan's investment network. Rumors claimed Laurent rarely attended public events unless business was involved. Victoria's expression changed instantly. Her posture straightened. Her smile brightened. She turned toward the entrance with polished excitement already prepared on her face. "Oh my God," one of her friends whispered. "That is Alexander Laurent." Several women nearby adjusted their dresses subtly while photographers rushed closer toward the entrance. But Alexander barely acknowledged any of them. Rainwater still glistened faintly across the shoulders of his coat as he stepped into the ballroom with quiet confidence, his attention scanning the room once. Then stopping completely. "Oh Naomi." The silence that followed felt heavier than music. Victoria blinked. Ethan looked between them with growing confusion. Because Naomi did not react like someone meeting a billionaire for the first time. She simply held his gaze calmly, almost knowingly. Alexander crossed the ballroom slowly while guests moved aside without being asked. Every camera followed him. Every whisper grew louder. Victoria lifted her champagne glass quickly and stepped forward first with a practiced smile. "Mr. Laurent," she said warmly, extending her hand. "I am Victoria Hale. It is such an honor to finally meet you." Alexander glanced toward her politely for less than a second before continuing past her completely. The smile vanished from Victoria's face almost instantly. Then, in front of the entire ballroom, Alexander Laurent stopped directly beside Naomi Carter. His expression softened slightly as he reached for her hand with quiet familiarity. "You came," he said gently. Naomi looked up at him beneath the chandelier light. "You told me not to disappear," she answered softly. And for the first time that night, Ethan Whitmore realized he was no longer the most important man in Naomi's story. No one in the ballroom spoke for several seconds after Alexander Laurent took Naomi's hand. The silence felt unnatural inside a room built for noise and admiration. Crystal glasses paused halfway to lips. Camera flashes slowed. Even the musicians near the stage looked uncertain whether they should continue playing. Victoria stood motionless beside the champagne tower, humiliation